So hello everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Leonardo Gomez. I'm an analytics specialist at AWS based out of Toronto, Canada. I'm so happy to be here today and thank you again for coming. I'm happy to see customer in person again. So thank you for your interest in this session. Okay, so today we are going to talk about how to secure and how to identify sensitive data using AWS Glue. Okay, so it's a new feature that we announced hours ago. Okay, so as part of today's presentation, I'm going to walk you through how this new feature works. And actually, we are going to have two demos. Okay, not only theory, you're going to see this new feature in action. Okay. So for those who are not familiar with Glue, okay, so Glue is our ETL or data manipulation service. Okay, so it helps you to integrate your data faster, okay, because we offer different ways to speed up your data integration process. For example, we offer custom connectors. We have around 60-something, 63 right now, and we are working to add more. Also, we automate at scale. So actually, today was also announced the auto-scaling feature for Glue. So you don't need to worry anymore about provisioning DPUs, okay, because we are going to scale the capacity for you. And the last one, and this is my favorite one, is that Glue is a serverless solution. Okay, so you don't need to worry about clusters, you don't need to be worry about or running operations on top of your data platform, because we take care of that for you. Okay, so the only thing that you have to do is bring your code and your data, of course, and we are going to take care of that. We are going to take care of everything else for you. And you don't need to pay for something that you are not using. Okay, so you are going to run your job is when you start paying, and when the job is done, you don't need to pay anymore. Okay, again, you don't need to pay for something that you are not going to use or something that you are not using. Perfect. So 1 year ago, we released Glue Studio. And for some customers, this was a game changer. Okay, why? Because before Glue Studio, the only way that we had to interact with Glue was by coding. Okay, coding using Python or PySpark, Scala, and so on. Okay, so it was amazing for those customers or those users with coding experience, but it offered a challenge to those customers who didn't know how to code. So with Glue Studio, we are able to cover both type of users, those with experience coding and those without any experience. Okay, we offer a wonderful UI, and actually you are going to see it today as part of the demo. Then you can use to create your ETL jobs without coding. Okay, just using the UI, you are going to be able to create your data pipelines. Okay, so now you already know that Glue is an ETL solution. Okay, it's serverless. But now let's talk about how to identify and secure sensitive data using AWS Glue. So, but before that, let's talk about data privacy. Why data privacy is so important. Okay, so the first reason is because it prevents breaches and misuse. Okay, so if you have a very good data privacy policies, even though somebody goes and have access to your data, your private data is going to be protected. Okay, so that is going to reduce the reach of the problem that you may have if somebody access your data. Okay, so the other reason is because it depends on the industry that you work on. You need to comply with different regulations. I'm talking about PII, PCI, HIPAA, and so on. Okay, so in order to comply with those, you need to enforce data privacy. And the last one, my favorite one, is that you want to maintain your customer trust. Okay, so your customers, your users, they need to know that their data is secure. Okay, if they know that, they're going to trust in your solution, your service, and so on. And this is the most important thing for everybody, okay? Maintain customer trust. So finding and securing sensitive data is difficult, okay? Why is this difficult? Because we have a huge volume of data right now, okay? So, and we are generating more. Every single year, we are not just only duplicating, we are, I don't know, multiplying the number of data that we are producing by 10 or maybe more, okay? So with more data set and more volume of data, it's more difficult to identify and secure sensitive data because we need to run identification jobs, to give you an example, on top of a crazy volume of data. Then we have new sources. Okay, 10 years ago, we used to have just databases and data warehouse. Okay, those were our main focus. But now that we have streaming, we have APIs, we have log files, and so on, it's becoming more challenging because we have different data sources with different behavior. And that takes us to our following point. So we are also increasing the diversity of our data. Okay, as I mentioned before, right, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we had just databases. Now we have log files, we have image, we have API calls, we have JSON files, we have the data lakes, databases, and so on. Okay, so that also increased the grade of difficulty of processing or identifying the sensitive data, because we need a solution that is flexible enough in order to adapt to all those data sources and data types, okay? So another thing is that the traditional solutions leave you open to risk. Why is this? Because you, in order to identify the sensitive data, you have to do it after the data lands into your database or data lake, okay? So in some cases, a common pattern is that you ingest a bunch of data, and after 3-4 days, after some days, is when you run the job that is going to identify if you have sensitive data or not, okay? So that affects you because first, it affects the time to market of the data, because you have to wait until you run that process in order to share it with everybody. And also you are going to have a period of time in which your data is going to be open, okay? The other thing is that when you do data identification, sensitive data identification like that, you are going to run your identification jobs on top of high volume of data. Why? Because you are, instead of running these every hours or every day, you have to wait days, okay? And that increases the volume of data that you are going to use in order to identify the sensitive information, okay? And that generate costs because the processing time are going to be higher. And then, once you identify the data, the possible actions that you may take in order to protect your data in the majority of the cases could be manual. Okay, so it could be an ETL job, it could be a Python job, to give you an example. So what happens is if you have a new source, okay, you need to go and you have to change your logic in order to protect your data. And that is not flexible at all. Okay? So that's why we announced this morning, okay, the availability of our new feature of AWS Glue, in this case, sensitive data protection. Okay, so what is the difference between this new feature and the traditional approach? The first one is you are going to secure the data, or you're going to identify the data when it arrives. Why? Because you can identify the data as part of the ETL job that you are using to ingest the data. Okay, so you don't need to wait until the data lands on your data lake, for example, to run an identification job, because the ETL job that is going to move the data inside your data lake can identify the data for you. Okay. The other thing is that it's going to help you with your processing time and cost, because you are going to identify the data when it arrives, so you are going to do it in an incremental way. So you don't need to wait 3 or 4 days or whatever time you need to wait in order to run your identification job, okay? And the other thing is, okay, as part of the ETL job that you are using to ingest the data, you are going to identify the sensitive data, but you also are going to trigger the action that is going to protect the data, for example. So as part of the same ETL process, you can extract the data from the source, identify the sensitive data, and mask the data, for example. And then that data is going to land masked or redacted inside your data lake. Okay, so if you see, as part of the process that ingests the data, you can identify and also protect your data at the same time. In a very easy way, you are going to see it during the demo, okay? But that is going to help you to speed up your ETL jobs first, and second, your identification jobs, okay? So how we detect the data, okay? How we detect the sensitive data. So we have a built-in machine learning model that we offer, okay, as part of this feature to help you to identify your sensitive data, okay? We also offer out-of-the-box or domain-specific detectors, okay? So for example, HIPAA, PII, you're going to see it in a minute, and so on, okay? So these are out-of-the-box detectors that we offer as part of the feature. And also, we offer the option of creating custom detectors. Okay, what happened? We offer a list of out-of-the-box detector, but in some cases, you have a very specific use case that you want to cover, okay, that is very unique to your company, that's fine. So in that case, you can go and you can create your own custom connectors. You can have your own custom connector, custom detector library, okay? So, and actually you can end up having a mix of the entities that we offer or the detectors that we offer out of the box, plus your custom entities or custom detectors. We are going to see this in more details during the demo, but just to let you know. So, as I mentioned before, we offer different categories for the detectors. Okay, so we have universal. So, for example, person name, email, and so on. Okay, so this category applies to, it doesn't matter the regulation or the use case, they may apply. We have United States entities related, for example, a driver license, phone number, and so on. Social security number, this is a very popular one. HIPAA, okay, we offer around 7 or 8 different entities related to HIPAA. Networking, MAC address, IP address, and so on. And again, the custom entities, the ones that you can create based on your use case. And we are going to add more, okay? So we love to collect feedback from our customers, okay? So if you feel that you need to have one of those, an entity that you use a lot as part of the built-in entities that we offer as part of Glue, reach out to your solution architect and we can identify if we can add that entity as part of this feature, okay? So let's talk about custom detection patterns, okay? As I mentioned before, if you have a unique use case, you can create your custom entities. So the way that it works, they are based on regular expression, okay? Yes, the same regular expression that we have been using for years, you can use it to identify your data patterns or your sensitive data. But it's not only that, okay? We have a combination of regular expression and contextual keywords, okay? To give you an example, imagine that you want to identify a driver license number, okay? So you are going to add the regular expression, perfect, to validate the format, but also you can add context keywords that are going to help Glue to identify your pattern, okay? To give an example, you can put the word driver, the other word license, and if you want to identify a driver license from a specific state, for example, Florida, you can add the word Florida. Okay, so all those words are going to help Glue to identify your sensitive data or your custom pattern. Perfect. So what happened? Okay, we already talked about how to identify the data, but once we identify the data, what happens? What are the possible actions that you can take once you identify the data, or the sensitive data in this case? So the first thing, we offer 4 right now, okay? We are going to keep adding more, but right now, at this very moment, we offer 4. The first one is that you have the option to add a column with the findings. So what this means is, imagine that you have a table, okay? And we are going to add a new column that is going to be a kind of flag that is going to tell you if that specific row has PII data or sensitive data or not. And based on that, to give you an example, you can apply row level security if you need to, okay? You can filter by that flag, and you can restrict the access to those columns, or those rows in this case. The second one is that you can output a list of the the columns that contain sensitive data. Okay, so for example, if you want to generate a report, okay, that you want to share with your data teams or your security teams, and say, look, this table that you're trying to ingest, that you are trying to add as part of your data lake has sensitive data. Okay, just for a report purpose, you can do it. Okay, and we have another one. This is an out-of-the-box option as well. So you can redact the data using AWS Glue Studio. So you're going to see it actually as part of the demo. So once we identify data, sensitive data, it could be at the column level or also at the row level, we are going to redact the data for you. Actually, you can select the value that you want to use in order to replace the sensitive data based on your security policies, and you can do it. And the last one, okay, is you can trigger custom actions on top of your data. Okay, so if, Glue Studio offers the option to add a custom transform that you can use to do literally wherever you want. Okay, so for example, you can use the Boat-to-Tree library, and you can do an API call to whatever AWS service you want. Okay, so the number of use cases that you can cover with the custom actions is huge. Okay, so let's talk about how we can use the feature, how it works, okay? So the first thing that you have to do is you have to identify if you want to, what kind of detection do you want to do? So do you want to do a full scan, okay? You want to read the data row by row, or you want to do a sample scan column by column, okay? It depends on your use case. We offer both options. Once you select the scan type, you are going to select the entities that you want to identify. You have 2 options also here. You can use the entities that we offer out of the box, and also you can create your custom entities. Up to you. And again, if you want to use a mix between custom entities and built-in entities, you can do it as well. Okay? And the last step is processing. Okay, so you have different options here. So you can store the results if you want to. You can redact or mask the data, or you can trigger a custom action, as I mentioned before. Okay, so these are the 3 main steps that you have to take in order to use this feature. So now I'm going to show you the UI, okay? We are going to see the UI a lot during the demo, but I just wanted to walk you through the flow, okay? So the first thing, as I mentioned before, that you should do is you need to identify what kind of scan are you going to do. Full scan, row level, or sample scan, column level, okay? Then you are going to identify the data types or the entities that you want to identify. Could be out of the box, could be custom. Okay, here you have the option to create the custom ones. And then you can select the action that you are going to take once you identify the data. Okay, once again, we're going to cover this during the demo, but just to let you know, just to give you a small view how the UI looks like. Okay, perfect. So let's stop talking about theory and let's go to the action. Okay, I prefer to show you how it works. Okay, and for that, I prepared for today two examples or two demos. The first one, we are going to find and redact sensitive data row by row, okay? For that, this is a use case that I prepared for you for today, okay? Very simple use case, okay? I like to keep the example simple to deliver, but this example is going to deliver a powerful message, okay? So our use case for today, for the first demo, we are going to have just one table containing customer comments. So for example, look, I have a problem with the payment of my insurance policy. Please use this credit card number, okay? The customer put that information as part of a comment field. And we are going to try to identify different entities. In this case, name, email, credit card, IP address, phone number, passport, social security number, and bank account. And also, as part of this demo, we are going to create a custom entity. In this case, it's going to be the Canada permanent resident number. Okay, so let's go to the console. Perfect. So, of course, the first thing that you have to do, you have to go to the Glue Studio console. Okay, so let's create a job. So we have different options here. We are going to select a visual with a blank canvas. Okay, for those who are not familiar with Glue Studio, this is the Glue Studio canvas that you can use to create your ETL jobs without any code, okay? So I'm going to add the job details before I start creating the job, okay? So perfect. I'm going to select the IAM role that I'm going to use for today. Remember that this role should have access to the source and the destination, okay? And should have access also to run the Glue process. I'm going to use Glue 3 with the Spark 3.1, okay? The latest version that we offer. And I'm going to disable bookmarking. I don't need it for this demo. And I'm going to set the number of retries to 0. I hope that we are not going to need those for today's demo, okay? So, perfect, I have all the information that I need. I'm going to save it. Perfect, and now I can start creating my job. So, let's start from selecting the source. In this case, I'm going to select the data, the source directly from S3. Okay, so I'm going to select S3 here. I'm going to select the bucket that I'm going to use. Perfect. So if you see Glue Studio out of the box, it understands that this folder contains CSV files, and those CSV files are delimited by comma, okay? And also, you can see here that Glue automatically detects the schema, okay, of your CSV file. Another thing that I'm going to show you as part of today's demo is the data preview feature, okay? So you can see during the execution or during the creation of your ETL job, you can see your data, okay? You can see it from its original state, that this is an example that we are going to run right now. This is going to take a minute in order to run. But the beauty about this feature and why I like it is because you can see how the data is getting transformed at the same time that you are creating the job. Okay, so you don't need to run a job just to see how the result looks like. Okay, with the preview, you can run it. You can see, you can apply the transform. Actually, we're going to do that today. And you are going to see in, let's call it real time, how the data is looking after you apply the transformations. And when you feel that the data is getting to the state that you want to have, is when you execute the job itself. Okay? So in that way, you don't need to pay for every time that you want to see how the data looks like after applying the transformations. Okay, this is going to take 20 more seconds, bear with me. Another thing that you have to be aware of when you are using previews is that the first time is going to take a couple of minutes, but after that, it takes only seconds in order to refresh the data, okay? So here you have the data set that we are going to use today, okay? So as I mentioned before, these are customer comments, but we have a bunch of sensitive data here, okay? We have social security numbers, we have email address, we have cell phone numbers, we have personal names, and so on. And here, if you can see the last one, okay, row number 11, you can see that we have a Canadian permanent resident number, okay? So let's see how can we identify and mask this sensitive data. For that, I'm going to add a transform. In this case, it's going to be, of course, detect PII, or detect sensitive data. And here, we have the options that I showed you before during the presentation. So we have the option to scan the data row by row or by column, okay? So what happened here? So I already select this. It is the option that comes by default, no problem at all. And now you can select the type of sensitive entities or data that you want to identify or select, okay? So if you want to select all the patterns or all the entities that we have available, you can do it, no problem at all. You can select also categories. So if you want to just identify HIPAA-related information, you can do it, okay? Or you can select the last one, in which you can manually select all the entities that you want to identify, okay? So you have two options. You can do it from here directly from the list, or you can use this window that we offer in case that right now it's easy to find because we have just 17 patterns, but when you have 100, you are going to use this window in order to find those patterns or entities way faster. So for today's example, I'm going to select credit card, email address, IP address, okay, what else? Let's go to page 2. Person name, social security number, why not? Driving license, US passport, phone, and account number, okay? So we have a total of 9 entities or 9 patterns. So I'm going to confirm, and you are going to see here the list of all the entities that we want to identify. So after that, the only thing that we have to do now is to select the action that we want to take. So the first one is you can enrich the data with the detection result. I mentioned this during the presentation. We are going to add an extra column that is going to offer you a way to identify if that specific row has PII data or sensitive data or not, okay? So in this for this case, I'm going to redact the data, okay? That is the second option that we have. And also, I can customize the value that I'm going to use to replace the sensitive data, okay? So perfect. I have everything that I need. So the only thing that I have to do now is to preview the data. So as you can see now, it took seconds just to show you the preview of the data. And you can see that the sensitive data that we had before is gone. Okay, social security number is gone, email is gone, a person name is gone, and so on. Okay, but if you can see here, in this last row, the Canadian permanent resident number is still there. Why? Because it's not part of the list of the entities that we offer out of the box. But no problem at all, we have a solution for that. So you can go back to the transform, and in this case, you can select the option to create a new entity. That is going to take us to the entities of the pattern creation window. So the first thing that we have to do is create the pattern name. So I'm going to put here a PR number. And here, we are going to add the regular expression that we are going to use. Okay, I have one already prepared for this demo. Let me copy this. And I'm going to put it here. So very simple. The only thing that I need is that the first letter is a capital P, the second one a capital D. The number should have 7 digits, and the first one should be a 0. Okay? And here we have the context words. So if I want to help Glue to identify this specific pattern, I can give you these words to help it to identify if that pattern belongs to the sensitive data that I'm looking for. So for this example, as I mentioned before, this is the Canadian permanent resident number. Okay? So I can add a word that said Canada permanent resident number. Okay? So when we scan the information, if we found the pattern, but also those words, we are going to mark or identify that information as a sensitive information. Okay, so again, it's a combination between the regular expression plus the content words that you are providing to the entity. Okay, so perfect. I'm going to create the pattern. Amazing. And the only thing that I have to do here is go, and you are going to see it here automatically. So I'm going to select it, I'm going to confirm it, and just to double check, you can see it here now, okay, as part of the list. So let me preview my data again. And now my PR number is gone. Okay, so you can replicate this, you can do this with your custom entities, and you can create your own entity libraries. Okay, so if you saw, as you saw it, it's very, very straightforward. It took me just a couple of minutes to do it. Okay, perfect. So in this case, the only thing that I need to do is add the target. In this case, it's going to be S3. I'm going to change the format to Parquet in this case for this example, and I'm going to select the destination. Okay, oh, sorry, let me go back. It's going to be this one. I'm going to add a folder or a prefix. And let me copy this here, sorry about that. I'm going to select the option that I'm going to create I want to create a table on top of the Glue catalog. Okay, you can do that. I'm going to select the database. I already created this database for this demo. And then the table name, I can put wherever I want here. So I'm going to use the same name as the prefix, comments redacted. Okay. Perfect. I think that we have everything that we need. I'm going to save the job. Amazing. And the only thing that I have to do now is run the job. You can see here the execution of the job. So as you see, just with 3 steps, I was able to move data from whatever source to a specific destination. I was able to identify sensitive data that is part of a row, and I was able to dump after I identified the data, I was able to redact it, and after that, I'm able now to send that data to my data lake, to give an example. Everything as part of the same ETL job that was supposed to ingest, to send data inside my data lake. So I don't need an extra process, I don't need extra compute in order to do that, because now you can secure your data at the ingestion time, okay, using Glue Studio. So this is going to take a couple of minutes to run, okay? So if you see, something that I want to call out is that it took us 6 seconds in order to give this job the resources that it needs in order to run, okay? Only 6 seconds. And now you can see we can see here the execution time. So in the meantime that we are waiting, another thing that I want to show you is that with Glue Studio, you can go here to monitoring, and you can see in a centralized way all the jobs that we are running. okay? So in this case, in the last 7 days, I have run 26 jobs, okay? Right now I have a job that is running. I had 18 jobs that finished successfully and 7 that failed. And actually here you can see the success rate, and you can see some graphics that I'm going to show you the how many jobs did you run and if they were successful or not. And also, you can have here a list of all the jobs that you have run, or that you have run, and the ones that are currently running. Okay, ours are already finished. Okay, so it took just 1 minute in order to run. So let me show you this, just to validate that everything went fine. Perfect. So now let's go to Athena. Okay, I'm going to, if you see, I have here right now just one table, employees. That is the one that we are going to use for the second demo. Let me refresh. We're supposed to have 2 tables now. We have it. Okay, customer redacted. And if I want to let preview the information of the table in this case, I'm going to change the limit to 15 because I want to show you something interesting here. And as you can see, all the data is redacted. Okay, so powerful point here is that your data is going to land your data lake protected. Okay, imagine in this case I use from S3 to S3, but imagine that your source is a database that is on premises, to give you an example. Okay, as part of the ETL job that is going to move data from that database to your data lake, you can protect the data, and when the data arrives your data lake, it's going to be protected. Okay, in this case, it's going to be redacted. Perfect, folks. So let's go now to the second demo that we have for today. Okay, so can we switch to the presentation, please? Okay, thank you. Perfect. So I'm going to give you a description of the use case. Okay, so in this case, this is a very interesting demo. Okay, so we are going to enforce column level security using Lake Formation. Yes, we are going to combine Glue Studio with Lake Formation. So the way that this demo is going to work is that we're going to have just one table, again, simple examples, and we are going to have 2 users. One user with limited access, no sensitive data access, and a second user with full access. Okay, so we are going to run a Glue job that is going to use the sensitive data feature, a sensitive data identification feature, to identify if that table has sensitive data. And based on that, based on those findings, we are going to add Lake Formation tags to specific columns to change the access pattern that just one table is going to have. And then after that, I'm going to show you how the access is going to change for user 1 and for your user 2. Okay? Again, this is really cool because you can now automate the identification of sensitive data, and not only that, you're going to be able to automate adding the tags, the Lake Formation tags, to your columns. And thanks to that, you're going to be able to enforce column or even row level security if you want to. Okay? So let's go back to the console. Perfect. So I'm going to create a second job, but before that, I'm going to show you my 2 users. Okay? So I have our limited user. Okay? So if you see now, I have the employees table, and that user has access to all the columns, okay? Also, I'm going to show you the user that has full access. If I run the same query, also I'm going to have access to everything, okay? So also, to give you more context, I'm going to show you the Lake Formation policies that we have on top of that table. So as you see right now, all the columns, the tag that they have assigned is public. That means that everybody can access that specific table, okay? Or all the columns that are part of that table, okay? So, perfect. So let's go to Glue Studio. I'm going to close this for now. I'm going to create a second job. Okay, so in this case, I always like to start adding the job details. I'm going to select the IAM role. Remember, you should have access, this role should have access to the source, the destination, and the Glue resources. And actually, because we are using a lake formation, this role should have access to assign lake formation tags on top of that table. Okay, so again, you need four different permissions: source, destination, Glue resources, and lake formation tagging. Okay, I already did this before the demo, but just to let you know that you need that in order to run this. Perfect, so I'm going to keep using Glue 3 with the latest Spark version. I'm going to disable bookmarking. We don't need it for this example, and hopefully we are not going to need any retries, okay? Perfect, so I'm going to save it. Amazing. And now let's create a second job. So same procedure, we need to start from the source. In this case, for the previous example, we use S3, but for this example, we are going to use the Glue catalog. But if you see here, and I'm going to take a minute to share this information with you. So I'm using these two sources, the most common one, but you can use all these sources, okay? You can use Redshift, MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, Dynamo, and so on, okay? Actually, if you go to the connector, the Glue connector marketplace, right now we offer 63 different connectors. Okay, so what I mean by this is that if you want to run your identification job, or if you want to identify sensitive data, it's not only from S3. You can use whatever sources from this list, and the sensitive identification transform is going to help you with any of those. Okay, so that is a very important message there. And also, if a good point, if you cannot find a connector as part of the list that we offer inside the marketplace, you can create your own custom connectors. Okay, that is another option that you have. So in this case, I'm going to select, as I mentioned before, the table, same database, okay, the one that I created for this event. I'm going to select the table, employees, the one, this is a table that I created beforehand, and actually I showed you this table when we were running queries in Athena, okay? And then the second step is adding the transform. So in this case, it's going to be detect PII, okay? So before that, I want to show you the output schema. Okay, so we have first name, last name, social security number, phone number, salary, role, city, and hiring date. So we are going to protect for this demo, first name, last name, social security number, and phone number, okay? So for that, we can go here. So if you remember the previous example, I select the row level option. For this, I'm going to select the column level scan. Okay, this is different. Why? First, it's at the column level, of course, but the second is that you can play with the percentage of data that you are going to scan in order to identify if that data is sensitive or not. Okay, so imagine, to give you a simple example, that you have a table with 100 rows. Okay, so you can tell Glue, look, I just wanted to scan 30% of the data or 40% of the data. So you know your data, the nature of your data better than anyone, so you can play with that percentage. Why is that? What is the reason of that? Because if you have a huge data set, okay, if you scan 100% of the data, that is going to take more time. But if you consider that 40% of the data as a sample is enough, you can do it. And that is going to help you with the performance, again, because you are not going to scan the entire data set. Okay? For this example, the data set is small, so we can leave it at 100%. And the second option is the detection threshold. Okay? This is a good one. So what happened? You can, first, you select the sample of the data, okay, the size of the sample, sorry. But the second one, you can say, look, from that sample, okay, if 20, 30, 40, or 100% of the data contains sensitive data, is when we are going to mark that column as a sensitive column, okay? So again, you have the sample, and inside the sample, you can decide what is the percentage of data that should have sensitive data inside for us, or this case for Glue, to mark that column as a sensitive column, okay? Why we offer this? Again, because you have different data natures. So we don't know if you have a table with 100 of columns, or if you have millions of records. So thanks to this, you can tune based on your needs, and that is going to help you to speed up improve performance in case that you need to. Okay, so perfect. Here we have the same options that we had in the previous example. So I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to select specific patterns. So in this case, I'm going to select, as I mentioned before, name, if I'm not mistaken, person name, social security number, okay, and if I'm not mistaken, okay, let me confirm and go back. We can do that, no problem at all. Okay, so phone number, social security number, and name. Okay, person name, social security, and phone. Okay, we have everything that we need. And here, if you remember the previous example, we redact the data. For this, the thing that we are going to do is we are going to create a data frame, a dynamic frame, or data frame, containing the name of the columns that we identify as sensitive and the type of entities that we identify. So for example, person names contain a sensitive entity called person name, okay? Or social security number column has SSN entities related, okay? So perfect. So we create that output, okay? We are going to have that information as part of our output, the list of the entities that we identify. And now I'm going to trigger, or I'm going to add a custom action. In this case, I have to go here to transform, select custom transform, okay? And for those who are not familiar with custom transform, it gives you the option to add custom code as one of the transforms that are going to be part of your ETL job, okay? So if, for example, if you don't find the operation or the action that you want to do as part of our out-of-the-box transforms, you can code it, okay? So for this, I prepared this small piece of code, just like around 20 lines. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to copy here, and then I'm going to explain what I'm doing. So in a nutshell, we are doing a very straightforward operation here, okay? So we are importing the Boat2.3 library in order to interact with the APIs of a second service. In this case, the second service is Lake Formation, okay? So we are getting the data frame that we generate as part of the detect PII transform, and we are going to use that list of columns and entity to apply the Lake Formation tags on top of those columns, okay? So if you see here, I have the database name, okay, the one that we have been using today for the demos. The table, employees, the one that we use as a source. And here, the only thing that I'm doing is I'm changing the tag. Instead of having a public tag, we are going to have now sensitive, okay? You're going to see how that looks like once we run it, but this is all the things that we are doing here. Just getting the name of the entity, getting the name of the column, and changing the Lake Formation tag based on that, okay? Perfect, so I think that's it, okay? That's all that we need. Just 3 steps here, getting the data information from the source, identify the columns, and then the custom action that is going to apply the Lake Formation tags for us. That's it, very simple, okay? So I'm going to save it again, just in case. Perfect, and I'm going to run it. So this one is going to take around 3 minutes, okay? Let's wait and see the result. But in the meantime, another thing that I want to show you is that you can monitor the execution of your job, okay? So you can see here, if you see the section of the CloudWatch logs, that we generate 3 types of logs, okay? All logs, output logs. So for example, if as part of your custom code, you have some message that you print out, you can see it here. This is a right place to see those messages. So for the developers, this is a very common practice, okay? And in case that something goes wrong, you can go to the error logs and you can see what happened there, okay? Another thing that you can do, okay, when you're running Glue jobs is you can enable the Spark UI. So if you are familiar with Spark and you feel comfortable working with that for debugging, you can enable it, okay? And you can use it to see what is happening or what happened with your Glue jobs. So as you see, here we have 2 different options to debugging our jobs using the CloudWatch logs that we are showing here. And also you have the option to use the Spark UI, okay? Perfect. So in the meantime, another thing that I want to show you about this sensitive identification feature is that here you have the list of all the custom entities that we create. Okay, this is going to be your custom entity library. Okay, so right now makes no sense. We have just one, but if tomorrow, okay, when we have thousands or even hundreds or even thousands, sorry, you can come here and see what do you have available. So imagine that you are going to create a Glue job and you want to identify sensitive data. Instead of creating the entities, you can come here and see if what your colleagues create, okay, or your team create, and you can reuse it. Okay, actually there is a principal message here. So this entity library can help you to share, to collaborate. So in that case, if you are going to use an entity for different jobs several times, instead of creating an entity every time that you run it, come here and double check that you have it and use it, okay? So that is really good for collaboration. Let's go back to monitoring. Okay, as I mentioned before, this one takes a little longer. It takes around 3 minutes. Okay, we're almost there. And it finished, okay? So I'm going to show you a couple of things, okay? The first one, if you go to Lake Formation, if you see here, everything is public, okay? So everybody has access to the data. If I refresh the window now, the console, you can see now that it changed. Now we have a combination of public and sensitive. So what this means is that even though I have a single table, I have different access pattern on top of it, okay? So now let's show you how this looks like from the customer or the user point of view. So if we start with the full access customer or user in this case, sorry, if I click select, I'm going to see everything, name, social security number, and phone number. Nothing happened. Why? Because that user has full access. But if we go to the second user, in this case, the one with limited access, and I run the query again, I have access just to the non-sensitive data. Your data didn't change. We didn't apply any transformation here. The only thing that we did was reading your data, identify the sensitive columns, or the sensitive column that you have on top of that table, and apply different permissions depending of the access level of your different users, okay? But if you go to S3, you are going to have your same data, nothing changed, okay? So now imagine this across your company, okay, across your data lake. Now you can run a Glue job that can scan all your information inside your buckets, and based on that, you can apply Lake Formation policies. And for this example, I did it at the column level, but you can do it also at the row level if you want to. Okay, so this is very useful, again, because you're going to be able to enforce security or enforce privacy in this case in a very easy way. Okay? Perfect, so let's go back to the presentation, please. Thank you. So with that, we conclude our today's session. So thank you so much for coming. I know that this feature is very interesting, and I'm pretty sure that you are going to find it very useful. Again, it's a game changer. You can now protect your data at the ingestion time, and it is powerful. Okay, so play with it, and remember, if you have any question, if you want to implement this in production, reach out to your account team, your solution architect, and we are going to be more than happy to help you to implement this feature as part of your data strategy. Thank you for coming. Perfect. Do you have any questions, folks? We have 2 minutes. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, can you come closer? I cannot hear.
Can we replace the original information with false information?
Yeah, you can do it. You can do it. Actually, the thing that I did, I used the Lake Formation API. So whatever action that you can do with the APIs, you can add it as your as part of the custom transform, and you can do it. No problem at all.
So on your first demo, you had maximum allocated 10 DPUs, right? But is there a way to see actually how much DPUs was actually used?
Yeah, actually, that's when you go to the run history, if you scroll down, you are going to see the DPUs that you use, okay? So now it's different because you have auto-scaling, okay? So what happened before? You have to be careful with the DPUs because if you hit the limit, the job is gone, right? Or it shows you an error. With auto-scale, the thing that you can do is that you can provision extra capacity, and then when you run it, you can go to the console and see the number of actual DPUs that you use. Okay, so you can now, this announcement that we announced today changed that situation a little. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? Well, once again, thank you for coming, and thank you for your time.